Welcome to another DragonLance Saga review episode. It is Misham Deep Cult the 17th. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my spoiler review of the Doom Brigade. That's right. Now, this is actually by Margaret Weis and Perrin, and the way these reviews work is I give you my written review, and then afterward, we just sort of riff a little bit. If you want to throw out comments throughout the course of this discussion in the chat, if you're watching live, that is, then I will address them and we'll have just a good time. It's Thursday. Let's have some fun, shall we? Solange. All right. Now, I am going to be spoiling this story, so if you don't want to know how this shakes out, don't watch this. Go read the book and then come back and watch it. It'll be a good time. And I'm telling you, it's worth it. This is a good book. I stayed away from this book for a very long time, and now I feel bad about it. Actively, like, bad about myself for having stayed away. That's stopping now because we're going to talk about it. We're going to have fun. Okay, that being said, if you disagree with my take on this, if you see it in different ways, I'd love to hear those things. So leave it in the comments below, or if you're watching live, throw it up in the YouTube chat and we'll discuss it. But first, of course, as always, I'd like to thank the members of this YouTube channel and invite you to become a member by visiting the links in the description below. And if you ever want to pick up DragonLance gaming materials, that's another way of helping out this channel, is by using the affiliate link. And that's also in the description below. So let's get into this, the Doom Brigade. We are introduced at the very beginning of this to two groups, and the first of which is Kang's Regiment. This is a Bozak commander from the 1st Dragon Army Engineer Brigade, and they have about 200 draconians, and this is pretty much all of the draconians that are left after the War of the Lance. This is set like 25 years after the War of the Lance. So they're a dwindling species. There's no females, and this is it. For every single one that dies, that's one less of the entirety of the species. So Kang, the leader, has that ever present in his mind, like we are going extinct, and it's going to be bad. The second group are the hill dwarves, or the Neater dwarves, and they live in a village called Thorbardin. Now, we're again about 25 years after the War of the Lance, without any females among the draconian species, and they're nearing extinction with every death. This is why Kang decided to only use blunt weapons with the intent of knocking out their opponents when raiding Thorbardin, and the dwarves followed suit when returning raids to Kang's village. The two communities go back and forth raiding each other, the draconians stealing dwarven spirits, sheep, and crops, and the dwarves trying to steal that back. And that's really how this whole existence has worked since they settled in this mountainous region. What I think is so great about this relationship is that as soon as Kang said, look, we need to stop killing them so that they stop killing us, the dwarven Thane of Thorbardin was just like, hey, they're not killing us, so let's stop killing them. Against the opinion of his own war chief, Morthane, which I thought was just great because, yeah, why kill each other if you don't have to kill each other? Yeah, you're going to get a huge goose egg on your head from someone knocking you with an iron pole or something, but that's infinitely better than dying. In any option given, I always choose life. So I would definitely be down with this thumping route rather than murdering route. Okay, and again, it's just fun. You know, there's one thing about this novel that is very different than other novels. Well, first of all, it doesn't have any Kender, which it seems like, okay, that's a lie. There are Kender in it. Never mind. This is much like every other Dragonlance story, because Kender are featured in a very funny way. But that being said, this is a very funny novel. It's not like goofy, constant funny, but there are moments in it that you're genuinely sort of laugh, like harumphing, like to yourself, because it was a funny comment, a funny line. I will say this, however. There are a lot of typos in this. Now, I got it from my library. It was the ebook version of it. So I don't know if that's just that version or if it's across the board. There are names that are spelled differently over and over again throughout the entire book. There are punctuation errors. There are context errors. This thing is ripe with some problems, and I don't understand how that's even possible. First of all, Margaret Weis, I love you. You're an editor. Now, I understand you can't catch everything. That's what your editor is for. I don't understand how this can keep happening, because this isn't the first book that I've noticed this in. Okay, that being said, we're going back to the review. Okay, so the war chief Morthane threatened to... Oh, geez, I'm skipping ahead. Okay, so among the dwarves featured in this are Selquist, a half Dergar, half Neater dwarf, Augur, Mortal, and Pestle. These four do not fit into the Celebundin dwarven community, as they are generally thieves, stealing for themselves first in the raid before the greater community. It is how we see them... it is here that we see them trying to curry favor with the Thane by gifting his daughter a sheep from the last raid, so that he would in turn look the other way when they sold the previous dwarf property back to the dwarves for profit. So the war chief Morthane threatened to cast Selquist out of the community for his self-serving actions. And this is a huge issue. You know, we see this with elves. They become dark elves and they're sort of cast out of the light, as it were, which is why they're called dark elves. I never thought the dwarven community would be the same, because we've run across so many dwarves that are just sort of living outside of their communities. Flint Fireforge being first and foremost, right? So for Selquist to genuinely be concerned, even though he's feigning, you know, lack of concern about being thrown out of Celebundin and having nowhere to call home, I just thought that was an interesting addition to the dwarven communal dynamic that up until that point I was ignorant to. Kind of cool. No note. Okay, so frustrated but determined, Selquist decides to take him and his friends to Thorbardin through a secret air vent. Now, back at Kang's regiment, Solinary and Lunitary are going to be in full, there'll be full moons. So the draconians plan on raiding the dwarves, who made off with a few sheep and personal effects, including Kang's holy symbol, Tutekesis, which is a big one. Selquist is the one that stole that. And there's this really funny part about this, is that Selquist thinks that he's cursed because he took it, because a bunch of bad stuff starts happening to him. And it comes around later in the story, but I just thought it was really funny. Just by possessing it, he feels like it's cursed, but the only way he could feel like he could get rid of the curse is to give it back to the original owner instead of just discarding it, which is what I would probably do. Okay, so we get to see a lot of Kang's personality, reasoning, and methodology of leadership, which is very interesting. One thing that I never thought about Draconians was how they thought, or that they thought. You know, we always knew that they were sort of the workhorses and the grunts of the dragon armies. They were created to fight. And there were breeds of Draconians that were more or less intelligent and in control. And there, you know, the Lost Chronicles especially goes into the idea that, no, these creatures aren't just stupid grunts. There are some of them that are like that, yes. But by and large, they have their own ambitions, their own desires, their own wants, because they're living beings. You know, it's easy in fantasy settings to distill creatures to their most basic elements and think, well, they're not really alive, they're just mindless monstrosities. But that's not true for anything living. And I just think it's interesting applied to Draconians. And again, I'm late to the party here. I know everyone else has already read this. They've all already gone down that path. For me, it was new and interesting. Okay. I just lost my place. I stayed away from this because I was never interested in Draconians as characters. But I was wrong. This is great so far. Anyway, they make a plan to raid the dwarves, but the dwarves make an educated guess about the moons being out, so the Draconians will then probably plan and come and attack them, so they have their forces ready for them. This is when Selquist and his friends sneak out, only to be followed by Slith, a Sevac Draconian and Kang's second in command. We meet him in Lost Chronicles as well, if memory serves anyway. He takes a few soldiers with him in pursuit under the assumption these dwarves would try to raid their home, while the Draconians were raiding the dwarves. They are followed to the valley before Thorbardin, and when Slith learns of their plan to sneak into Thorbardin and not raid the Draconians, he leaves to return and inform Kang. Back at Celebundin, the dwarves meet with great resistance, but ultimately fall back into the brewery, threatening to pour out all of the ale rather than giving it up to the Draconians. Kang ends up casting a stinking cloud spell in the middle of the brewery, and dwarves just jump out of it, just coughing and choking and spitting. And not even the Draconians can go in to claim the dwarven ale because it was so potent for a little while. They had to let it air out. I thought that was really funny too. Okay, that being said, as soon as it cleared out, they went in and they raided it, and they escaped with their loots. So the 4 dwarves entered the secret tunnel back in Thorbardin, disguised themselves as chimney sweeps, and just as a quick side note, I grew up with Mary Poppins. That was sort of my era, Disney live-action musicals. I absolutely love it to this day. I'm a big Julie Andrews fan anyway. I like musicals, sue me. And I can't watch that without singing along. It's just part of my childhood DNA, right? There's a moment where, you know, that song, chim chimney, chim chimney, chim chim tree. So they're talking about how it's lucky to shake a chimney sweep's hand. So they're sneaking through Thorbardin, come across a wedding, and the bride insists on shaking the chimney sweep's hand because it's good luck. I just thought that was a funny little addition to add. There's no reason why why Margaret would need or want or could or should have added it, but I'm still very glad that she did. Okay. Anyway, they entered the vast underground city through the old forged tubes, and they headed straight toward Thewar territory as Selquist was meeting up with his instructor in the fine arts of acquisitions, also known as thievery. So Selquist's instructor, his name is Chronix, thanked him for bringing his friends as instructed, and they ended up pulling off a big heist. My big complaint is that this was all done off camera. We don't get a read about this big heist. All we know is that they came back with a bunch of cool loot. That's frustrating for a reader, because that's an interesting moment that we could have experienced. And yes, it would have added probably, I don't know, 5 more pages at most, but it would have been worth it. Like, fuck. Sorry. So we pick back up with the dwarves returning to Celebundin. Selquist sends Mortar and Pestle to Pax Tharkaz in order to sell their loot, and he reveals the book to Augur that he stole from his master, Chronix. The book details the location of a treasure hoard of the dragon high lords in Naraka, which contains riches and female draconian eggs. So we now see where the story is going, if you didn't already figure it out before. Now, King is woken early in the morning after the raid, which ended with a massive party and an equally massive hangover, which is kind of par for the course with these draconians. They don't know how to limit their drink. That's something that I don't respect as a grown-up at all. You need to understand your own limits. You should never have a hangover in life. That's ridiculous. Maybe the first couple times because you don't know your limits, but anything after that, you're actively hurting yourself. That's stupid. All right. King has woken up. He's told that there are dragons flying over the plains of dust, which is not far south from where they are. So he takes a crew, and it reveals that there's 2 red dragons with riders of the Knights of Takhisis. So Talon leader Huzud, which is spelled 3 different ways. It initially starts as Huzzud for like the first half of the novel. And then at the second half of the novel, it goes to Huzzar, to Huzard instead of Huzud, and then it goes to just Huzud. This is a character that is kind of really important to Kang as a sort of a MacGuffin revealing character. Why would you not know how to spell the doggone character's name? As the creators of the character. This is really frustrating for me as a reader, but just as like a storyteller. Learn your characters' names. Come on. Anyway, so she's a Knight of the Lily, and she tells him that the Knights, about the Knights of Takhisis, because again, he has no idea. He's been down here hiding out for 25 years, right? They don't know anything about the Summer of Chaos, about how the Dark Knights have come over from Storm Keep and taken over all of Northern Anslon, and they've started to come into Southern Anslon. So she's telling them all about that. And that there's actually an army coming this way so that they can march on Thorbardin. She doesn't say that. He just assumes it, and she doesn't correct him. So Kang is wildly impressed and says, look, we need to meet with them. I would love to, we've just been sort of wasting away here. I would love to rejoin a force if it's worthy of our abilities. And so she tells him when to meet him here. And so he comes down and he sees all the troops and he's wildly impressed with the discipline. And there's this really wonderful juxtaposition from the enemy's side. We got this a lot in 2nd Generation and the Dragons of Summer Flame, with the good guys reflecting on the Knights of Takhisis and how impressed they were. It's different when it's the troops, the sort of the grunts, the draconians themselves, reflecting on the order and discipline of the Knights of Takhisis. It's really kind of cool seeing it from that perspective. So he offers to join, offers his regiment to join their mission, and the Lord Knight of the Skull, Robert Sykes, accepts them as the unit and tells them to meet them south of the south gate of Thorbardin in a couple days. So Kang returns and informs all of his troops that they're going to be leaving in a couple days. And when they do leave, the dwarves, afraid of an invasion because they see this massive, all of the draconians forming up together and marching out of their front gate, they become afraid and they start readying for assault, only to discover the draconians have abandoned their home. So they end up marching on the draconians' home to try to preempt an attack of them marching on theirs, only to find it completely empty. Just crickets. It was really kind of cool. The regiment arrives on time to meet Hazud, who leads them to the main force. Mortar and Pestle arrive at Pax Tharkaz, which is ironically ripe with racial distrust. Now, I don't know if it's absolute irony, but the idea that these good forces, these good races, come together to build a monument to their unity called Pax Tharkaz, and then just can't trust each other is just the bitter irony that makes the good guys stupid in this world. Just genuinely stupid. And why the Dark Knights could just come in and sweep them all up. Because no one wants to work together because they're bigoted. Like, you can't live in a world... No, we clearly do. But it would be a better world if you just judged people on their own merit. Just a little soapbox moment here. Hate whoever you want, but hate them for a good reason. Not because of what they look like or how they like to have sex or who they like to have sex with or how they see themselves. Who cares? If it doesn't affect you, who cares? Hate, but only with good reason. Okay. That's what we should tell the Whitestone Council. Hey, it's okay to hate each other. Just have a reason for it, other than your race. So the alliance between elves, humans, and dwarves that Lorana and Tanis have been working on has utterly failed. Palanthus and the High Clerist's Tower are occupied by the Dark Knights, and Pax Tharkaz fears that it is next. Now, the dwarves eventually get in and are unable to sell any of their stolen goods. After being overwhelmed by a mass of Kender, they flee Pax Tharkaz only to be captured by Dark Knights as they are returning home. Now, we've gotten a lot of scenes in a lot of Dragonlance books about masses of Kender and how they get together and how they act and interact with each other when they are. This was very different. It was like these dwarves were being swarmed by locusts. I'd never felt as claustrophobic as a reader as I did when reading about these two dwarves trying to get away from this family, not even a family, just this household of Kender. It was panicky. It was freaking me out, man. It was really funny. So back at Kang, he was brought to the logistics commander of the Dark Knights, who informs him to turn over their weapons and armor as they're going to be on latrine digging duty for the invasion of Kulinisty. Kang argues his unit's effectiveness and experience, but the human doesn't care. So Kang leaves the office frustrated, furious, and ends up speaking with his officers, and they all decide to leave the Dark Knights. Now, this is something that I was a little bit like, I don't know if that's the way that would shake out. And yes, the Dark Knights are preoccupied with trying to deal with Thorbardin and Kulinisty, so it's not like they have tons of free time, but they do have an entire Talon at their disposal. And we've come to find out they only sent Hazud to look after or to go capture the entire Draconian regiment, when in truth, they would have sent out platoons, like groups of squads of soldiers to go bring them back as deserters or execute them on the spot. Now, we can make arguments that Takhisis was looking kindly on them, but to be honest, this is the Summer of Chaos. Takhisis was focused on the other gods and chaos himself, or itself. So she didn't have much care about what was going on in Southern Ansalon at this point. She was trying to save her own hide and her creation's hide, her own sense of control, and laying her little plans for the Fifth Age and War of Souls, right? So it's frustrating to me to see a regiment literally walk away from a unit that they just agreed to join with zero repercussions and 0 people looking after them, like hunting them down. Wildly realistic. Just, it was really stupid. Anyway, they figure since they agreed to sign on with as engineers, since they weren't wanted as engineers, they could just leave. And they did. And nothing happened, so they were right. Stupid. So they run into the dwarves, Mortal and Pestle, who had escaped Pax Tharkaz, but then were caught by the Dark Knights. Then they escaped the Dark Knights. They used them as leverage in order to get past this small Dark Knight squad. And once they were in view of their own home mountain, they released the dwarves, thanking them for their help. This is something that we see a lot in this, is that, yes, the dwarves hate the draconians, and the draconians hate the dwarves. But they don't really hate them enough to murder them for no reason, and they kind of need them around. The draconians need them in order to steal their food and their dwarven ale. That they just can't make it themselves. They can't grow it themselves. So they need the dwarves. And the dwarves just kind of enjoy the sort of repartee they have with the draconians. They like having something. It's like a sports ball team. I'm clearly not a sports guy. It's like the Super Bowl, you know? You got your 2 teams. They love butting heads together and seeing who wins. But at the end of the day, they're all, well, in this particular case, they're all basically warriors. And so they kind of respect each other in that way. You don't ever see that in this world before, the DragonLance Saga. It's always, I will murder you for stepping over my imaginary line boundary. And that's it. I will murder you because you have pointy ears. I'm going to murder you because you're short. I'm going to murder you because my ancestor didn't like your ancestor. Never any logic behind it. Never any rational, critical thinking. This is the first novel that they've actually introduced it. And it is wildly refreshing. Okay. Where the hell was I? Okay, so the regiment returns to Mount Dashanak, which is their home, and they find their entire town on fire. And they still see dwarves inside of it, actively trying to ignite more parts of it on fire. And they're all uniformed, so they're part of the militia unit. The draconians see red, go crazy, swarm down in there, and just murder and butcher these dwarves. This is the first bloodshed since they first occupied this valley area. They're going crazy. And they start to kind of lose control of themselves, going into these berserk rages, right? Ultimately, Slith is always the one that has a clear head in all of this, for most of it anyway. And so he reaches out to King, calms him down. He's like, look, we need to get control of these troops. They're going to go march on Celebundin and kill everyone. And so they ended up getting control of everyone. But now they have to think. We have to rebuild the camp. We need to get some form of revenge. What are we going to do? They decide to invade Celebundin for intel on the attack with the Seavax, and Slith gets caught by his illusion form's wife. So he kills a dwarf standing guard, takes his form, then is walking through town, and the dude's wife walks up on him. What are the chances? And she just sort of lays into him like, what do you do? You said you had guard duty. Wah, 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 wah. Right? This is kind of a downfall of this writing as well, is that they always minimize, they always distill women and wives into their most abrasive and obnoxious, more tropey form. And the truth is never like that. You know, it's funny to see it every once in a while in a sitcom or something like that. But it's like every time there's ever sort of a wife in this, they're like this whiny, snipey character. And that gets tiresome to read about. I would like for once to read an understanding spouse, you know? I mean, Laurana and Tika are the only ones. Every other wife in this entire Dragonlance saga is the most whiniest, pitchiest creature ever to walk Krynn. It's frustrating. And most of the guys are like drunkards and just kind of stupid and bumbling around making stupid choices. Are there no other smart characters than the heroes? Like, it would just be nice to run across a random farmer who was witty and had a supportive wife, right? Because they exist. All right. Okay, so he gets caught by his wife. So he starts running away, fleeing into this dark home, which ends up being Selquist's home with the 3 other dwarves, and they're all huddled over this book with the treasure map. Slith immediately sees it as important and tries to steal it. Now, as the town militia is being raised, they're sort of searching everywhere. He grabs it, turns back into a draconian, tries to run out the door, but the door is dwarven size, not draconian size. He runs into it, hitting his forehead, knocking himself out, which is another hilarious moment. Kang was sort of pacing him with an invisibility spell the whole time. And so he turns invisible, grabs him, pulls him out, tries to smack him to wake him up, and they start running out of town. Selquist comes just right up, and we know he's a thief, so he sort of backstabs Kang, but like hits him in the leg, cutting this massive gash, and he's like bleeding out and stuff. It's pretty gross. But this dwarf actually is wrestling this magical book out of Kang's hands, and it ends up ripping. So the cover part, which had the map, it goes with Kang, and the inside part goes with Selquist, who then runs away because he doesn't want to be killed by Slith and Kang. Goes back, he runs into the city guard, the militia, Morthane, who doesn't believe anything of the story that he's telling, and Morthane ends up sort of sneaking in Selquist's garden to overhear, to eavesdrop on Selquist and his 3 friends. Hears about the map, hears that there's treasure, so he busts in the door, says, I want you to tell me everything, or else I'm going to throw you out of town, you'll never come back. So he ends up spilling the beans about everything. They end up trying to recreate the map from some of the dwarves' memory, which is, well, it's as good as they can get. And then that night, Selquist armors up and goes marching right over to the Draconians' keep. Now, he's doing this because he wants the Draconians to show him where the treasure is. They have the map. He doesn't. He doesn't think he can steal the map from them, but he can convince them to go after the treasure because of the draconian eggs. So he ends up being taken in front of Kang. He reveals everything. He gives back the medallion saying, will you lift the curse, please? And Kang is like, what? What curse? He's like, the medallion. Things have been going horrible since I stole this from you. I'm really sorry. Here, take it. We constantly see the dwarves and the draconians just having this sort of cordial back and forth, and it's always really funny. So he's like, okay, I'll lift the curse, and just sort of does like a mumbo jumbo thing, takes the holy medallion back, feels the warmth of Takhisis, and then Selquist in return is like, look, so, you know, I did you a favor, you know, could I see the map really quick? You know, he wants to clarify, and so he tells them everything that's on the map. He leaves. And then him and the dwarves and some of the guards go to Thorbardin. And this is the 3rd act of this entire book. It's them dungeon crawling through underground, sort of on the side underground Thorbardin, looking for this treasure. And the Draconians are following them, and they know the Draconians are following them, but the Draconians don't know that they know that. And it's all this bitter ruse so that Selquist can end up having the Draconians lure, you know, show them where this treasure is. Here's the deal. Right before they get in, Kang goes to pray to get his spells back, which is another nice little gaming touch to this, is that Kang is constantly refreshing his spell list, and they're all granted to him by Takhisis. One thing that's sort of this argument between Dragonlance fans that I've encountered anyway, anecdotally, is that where do creatures get their magic from? You know, dragons. Where do dragons get their magic from? Is it dormant in the earth in Krynn? Or do they get it from the 3 gods or one of the other gods? Well, draconians, they have to pray just like, you know, everyone else. Makes me kind of wonder, do dragons who are beholden to Takhisis and act whenever she calls, there's a group of them in Taladis that don't, but for the most part, they all, you know, respond. Do they get their power from her? I don't know. I think it's interesting. Now, clearly, you know, the sort of lore answer is that no, they get their power from dormant in Krynn. In the 5th age, that's where that, you know, that magic came from. But anyway, so they get into Thorbardin. They're sort of going through the tunnels and stuff. They run across this like 2 dead, flesh stripped off their bones dwarves. And they start freaking out like there's something down here that shouldn't be down here. And this sort of leapfrog game until they get to the sort of end scenes through the tunnels. So the Draconians are following the dwarves until they lose the dwarves, and the dwarves are just hiding out, waiting for the draconians to show them the secret entrance into the actual treasure tunnels. And so the dwarves, the draconians figure the dwarves have, been lost in the maze, the labyrinth underneath. So they go into the secret tunnels. The dwarves follow them. They run across this bridge over this massive chasm that has this hole broken out. But hey, they're engineers, so it's no problem. So Kang is resting. The entire regiment that they brought with them, like 25 guys, build this makeshift bridge, and they put it in place. And then they've been following this sort of rail tracks for mining carts, dwarves. And they hear this screech, like a banshee screech, and it's dwarves in these mining carts racing down, laughing and squealing, "Thanks for making the bridge, guys!" And they sort of like leapfrog them, and they go up to the bridge, and they like hit the edge of the bridge. The mining carts flip over, and they're like flying out, squealing and laughing and screaming and taunting, and land on the ground. And as soon as a couple of those mining carts come flying through, they're like, "Thanks a lot!" And they run down the tunnel. What they didn't know is that the draconians already sent a scouting party down the tunnel to see if they could find the treasure while they were sort of, cleaning up the area, because the draconians are very tidy. They're very disciplined, and I really appreciate that. Very funny. The dwarves think that they've just, gotten one up on the draconians, and they're racing down the tunnel, and then suddenly these draconians start charging them from down the tunnel. And they're like bracing themselves, ready to get attacked. And the draconians like jump and fly over them, soar over them, and just get around them. And then this massive, what is it called? Sorry, I'm jumping ahead here. I totally missed a part. I got to tell you guys. A grell comes flying down. So a grell is basically like a brain with a beak and a bunch of tentacles. And in one of its tentacles is a wand that I skipped over from telling you guys. Okay, so when Kang goes off to, before they go into Thorbardin, to memorize his spells, to pray to Queen Takhisis, he runs into Hazad, now not Hazud, because they've changed the spelling. And she tells him, "Look, the vision for the Dark Knights has completely changed. We only see death now. Takhisis has asked me to deliver a message directly to you. You need to, if you want those eggs, she's going to help you get those eggs, but you need to destroy these creatures that are down there. These are chaos minions down in this cavern that if they are unleashed, all of Krynn will die." So there's, in the Chaos War, there's a bunch of different pockets from sort of the abyss or whatever, negative realm of space that the chaos came from. That these chaos minions were coming out of. And there's modules about it and everything. Just this is one of them underneath Thorbardin. And she needs him to destroy them all. And if he does, then she will give him the wand, and then she will teach him how to crack open the eggs, and they can have babies and stuff. So he's totally down to help no matter what. Whether or not the wand's involved, he's devoted to Queen Takhisis, and he will do what she asks because it's his queen. And so, Hazud tells him that, and then that's when we go back in. Okay, so the dwarves are trying to deal with this grell, and they're getting their butts handed to them. Morthane is actually, like, obliterated by the wand, like, busted into tiny little pieces and everything. One thing about Morthane, there's this really hilarious banter between Selquist and Morthane, where Selquist always called him Morbane, or Morbrain rather than Morthane. It was really funny throughout the whole thing. He was constantly correcting him, and it just made him really angry, which made me laugh, and it's good times. So as the dwarves are losing this fight with this grell, the draconians are now coming in, and they kill it for them. The dwarves are sort of like picking themselves up, really kind of hurt and wounded. The draconians leapfrog over them, grab the wand, they're like, "Thanks for the wand, have a good day," and they race down the tunnel. Again, really kind of funny. The draconians end up getting to this massive cavern with like this intense searing heat. And when they walk into it, they feel dragon fear like they've never felt before. Massively intense and just scary to them. So they come out, they're like, "Oh, so whatever's in there, it's like the mother of all dragons. We've never felt this before. But the treasure room's at the other end of this. So we have to get through this room." And of course, it's not this cover, but it's the next cover you're going to see. So Kang is like, "Look, I'm going to go in there and deal with this. You try to go around this tunnel, see if you can get to the treasure room from this other tunnel. And you're now in charge if I don't make it back." Another part of this that's really sort of heartwarming is the relationship between Slith and Kang. It's absolutely mutual respect, admiration, soldierly love, and it's something that you would never understand, I don't think, unless you were a soldier. And I certainly understand what it means to have a brother in arms and how close and connected you get when you're in situations where you might not make it out. You were literally relying on them with your life. And so you grow this bond with them that you would never understand or experience otherwise. To see that reflected in these two characters was endearing, and it really made me connect with them a little bit more on a completely different level, which I really, really dug. So Slith reluctantly takes the rest of the soldiers, and they're going down this other path. Kang goes in, and he's got the wand. He's like, I'm going to face whatever beast is in here, and Takhisis has got me back. I'm going to deal with it. It ends up being like this monstrous ancient chaos dragon, which looks down, sees Kang, but doesn't even see him as worthy of bothering because it's so massive and powerful. It just figures, I'm just going to, it's an ant. You don't have to kill every ant you run across. It's an ant. So it's like getting out, and Kang is trying to figure out, I've got to do something. I got to do something. And this is about the time the dwarves come up, and they look in. They're trying to go into this massive cavern, but they are feeling that fear too. And so they're questioning whether they should just leave or whether they should go forward. They end up sort of using each other for courage, and they end up walking in. And Kang uses the wand to cause massive floods come from the ceiling, and it sort of puts the fire out of this dragon, which sort of weakens it as it starts to get down. Then he creates this massive mudslide from the ceiling, and it like completely cakes over and sort of weakens the chaos dragon. And that's when the other draconians come and reveal that their tunnel led them to the other side of this cavern, and the dwarves are on the other side. So they all come together, and they're all fighting the same dragon. And as soon as the draconians defeat the first dragon, there are more, the dwarves just sort of hightail it over the treasure exit room. So now the draconians are forced to face multiple chaos dragons as they are slowly, each of them, coming out. They seem to be getting smaller in size. At least that was the sense I got when I was reading it. But the fact is there's a ton of them. And it gets to a point when they're fighting them, and Kang realizes, we were never meant to survive this. Takhisis just lied to us so that we would fight it and try to kill it. She never expected us to live, but he didn't hold it against her because he knows her nature. He worships her. I thought that was another really beautiful part too. He's like, look, Takhisis, you didn't have to lie to us. We would have come down here and gladly given our lives for you, no matter what, and we still will. So he ends up telling his soldiers to get out of the cavern. He uses the wand to completely bring down the roof of this massive cavern. And he ends up like backing up toward the treasure room, trying to save himself. He starts getting hit by some rocks. The dwarves actually drag him to safety. However, they end up taking the wand too, saying, hey, thanks for the wand, and they run away. He ends up being trapped inside this massive cave-in. However, the cave-in does kill all of the worms that were in that sort of chaos lava spawn. So now the other draconians seemingly can't get to him. He can't get to them. He's trapped, so he can't get to the dwarves. And so he starts digging, bloody stumps coming about his claws. His claws are actually broken and busted apart. He doesn't know how long he's been in this damn place, but he's just sort of losing all of his spirit, and he feels like he's dying, right? So the dwarves end up getting into where the treasure room is. They find this false wall, and they start breaking through, and they end up revealing this massive amount of treasure, more than they ever anticipated it being, right? And then they find the eggs, too. So there's this like weird glow about the eggs. No one can quite get close to the eggs, and there's infinitely more than I had in my head. I was thinking like 5, maybe 15, but there's 100 eggs. They don't even like lay that on you until the very end after they've hatched. And they're like, and there's 100 little hatchlings. You're like, what? In my head, it was like 5. You got 100. Anyway, so the only dwarf left alive that really wants to kill these eggs is the brewer. Obviously, his wares are being stolen every like 2 weeks. And so he wants to crush all these eggs, but he can't quite get to them. Like something is holding him back. And then suddenly they realize, wait, we can't bring this treasure out of here. We're trapped. We're gonna die in here. We are trapped in this cavern. They start freaking out, and Selquist tries to use the wand in order to bust through the rock. It doesn't seem to be working. There's a little bit of back and forth between him and the brewer. He ends up throwing the wand, saying, "You try it if you think you can do better than me." The wand flies past the brewer, hits the container of eggs, and the eggs start hatching. And now the dwarves really want to kill them because they feel like this is like an Aliens moment. When you see all the eggs opening up and you realize you're food. You're not at the top of the food chain anymore. You're gonna die. So they start freaking out like, we've got to kill all these hatchlings. So cut over to Kang and the other draconians. He's trying to claw his way through. He sees a little bit of light filtering in through the massive cavern above him, but he can't really get there or see anything. And then he starts hearing the other draconians trying to dig him out. They end up pulling Kang out, and Kang is dispirited. He's like, we're going to die anyway. It doesn't matter. We can't get the eggs. Our race is doomed. Let's just give up. And Slith is like, no, there's another tunnel right here that leads right to him. Let's go. And Kang's like, what? Why didn't you say something? And they all go charging in just as the dwarves are stepping up to the eggs hatchlings. And there's this great moment where they're bartering over these eggs. And they're like, look, stop. If you give us the eggs, we will let you know how to get out of here. And the dwarves are like, well, we need to survive, but how about you leave the valley and you show us the way out and you help us carry some treasure, then we'll give you the eggs and you move to another place and then we'll do this together. And so they're just like bargaining over the lives of these 100 ostensibly babies, which is weird when you think about it. But they end up saying, okay, that's a great deal. We'll move. We get the babies. Kang now finally gets a sense like our future is secured. There are 100 females. Though they're hatchlings now, they will grow, and then they can propagate the species. And there's this great sort of back and forth between the dwarves they're trying to feign disinterest or disgust, but they're really, you can't see a baby and not feel your heart. If you're a parent, certainly. Before I was married, before I had kids, I didn't care. It didn't matter to me. But if you've had a baby, if you have kids, just seeing a little helpless child just pulls at your heartstrings. If you're a good human anyway. If you're a monster, then you definitely don't. And so these dwarves are reacting like that. They're like, "Oh, that's so cute," but I can't show that I like it. And the draconians are being super gentle, getting a couple of these little hatchlings in their arms, sort of collecting them. It's an adorable moment that reminded me of the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, and Grogu, the little Yoda baby. And I was thinking, if they made this movie, there's no way that those draconian hatchlings would be less cute than Grogu, the little Yoda baby. They would be adorable. Little baby lizard draconian people. They could make them so cute, sell tons of plush little toys and figurines and posters and t-shirts. This is a cash cow, Wizards of the Coast. I don't know what you're doing, but you need to make this as a miniseries and sell those draconian hatchlings. I'm telling you, I'd buy 10. Maybe 11. All right, definitely not 100. I wouldn't buy 100. At least the first season, maybe the second season. Okay, so anyway, this was a very, oh yeah, and on the way out, Selquist is like, hey, if you help me carry this treasure, I can tell you about this abandoned city just a little bit southeast of Naraka, which we know is going to be the draconian city of terror in the future. But it was just nice seeing that connection that, yes, they're bitter enemies, but they work together. They don't really hate each other. They just don't like what they've done. And even the brewer at the end is like, well, look, I understand what you did and why you did it. And you know what? If you want to get some dwarven ale from us, I could give you a good fair price for it. And so like at the end, everyone wins. I love this damn story. Everyone wins. It does, however, bring up some uncomfortable questions. For example, who gets to breed with the females? Do the females get a say? How many hatchlings will each of these females have? And then are they just breeding machines at this point? Do they have lives other than just breeding? Like, this is a reality you have to face that's uncomfortable, and there's no real easy answer, and this is why it's never addressed in the novel, but it's the sort of thing that I think about. Like, wait a second. In any post-apocalyptic world, like, I really loved 28 Days Later by Danny Boyle. It was released in the... I was stationed in Germany when it was released, so it was like early, like 2000 or something like that. Great film. But the survivors is this military unit with no women. They finally get women with them, and the only thing they want to do, you guessed it. So if you need to propagate the species, there has to be some baby making involved. But you want there to be autonomy of choice. You want there to be respect, right? And what about affection and love? Can that matter in a post-apocalyptic world when the species is at risk? I mean, it's a real thing to consider, and there's no easy or right answer because we're not there. We don't have to deal with it, which is good. But it is something that you kind of have to think about in this particular scenario with the draconians, because they literally lead you up to those questions and then don't talk about them. Anyway, this was a very funny and surprisingly heartwarming story. I'm ashamed that it took me this long to read it, and I genuinely loved it. I cannot wait to read the next in the series, as Kang's Regiment has turned my opinion of draconians completely around. I also enjoy seeing the Summer of Chaos through Southern Ansalon's filter. I was always upset that the Dark Knights took over everything off camera. I would love to know more about their invasions into Quillenesti and their assaults of Thorbardin. You know, we got a little bit of that here. I want more. So anyway, I really appreciate it for that. I would absolutely recommend this novel to... Sorry, I just ate, and so I'm like trying not to be super gross by like burping and stuff. I would recommend this novel to anyone who loves Dragonlance, Draconians, or its authors. This is one of Margaret's better works, and I mean that. Like, this is top 5 Margaret Weis novels in Dragonlance for me. It's that good. I was laughing and just felt good the entire time. And it was just like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's funny. And no, it's not catered to my age group. Of course not. But I can still watch kids' movies and enjoy myself in the same way that I read fantasy novels and enjoy them for what they are, not what I need them to be or expect them to be or want them to be. So I definitely think that everyone else should check it out too. All right, let me see what you guys are saying in here, because I see a couple of things. Anthony Edwards, thanks for joining live, man. They were humanized draconians to you. Prior to this, draconians were just intermediate. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. That's how I saw it too. And Slith is awesome. I thought Slith was a little too ham-fisted in the Lost Chronicles. I think I mentioned him in the reviews. But they were writing it so much like, hey, you know who this is, right? You know what he's going to go do, right? You know who this is? Like, okay, enough. Just let the character be the character and stop feeding us futures. Strict the Second, loved the book. They did the Draconian, what Richard Knack did for Minotaurs, humanized them. Yeah, I think this is better than the Minotaur stuff. But to your point, I definitely agree. You're absolutely right. Luke, thanks for joining live, man. He never read it. Oh, dude, it's free in the library. Like, the app to my library, I searched it. Of course, there's no wait list for it. So literally, the second I searched for it, I started reading it. And it delivered it through Amazon Kindle and everything, so you could just use your Kindle app. It was great. Anthony Edwards, the rough riding was something that bugged you here. Yeah. I mean, you gotta... That's the authors, you know? You either accept it or you don't. We clearly do. Hey, Trees, yeah, I'm glad I read it too. There is a sequel, and I will be reading that. Thanks for the heads up. It's awesome to see someone's first interaction. I recommend the short story where Slang's regiment used drunk minotaur and a catapult to kill a silver dragon? Oh yeah, Anthony, that sounds amazing. What collection is that in? I definitely want to read that short story. Let's see. Hey, Benjamin, thanks for joining live. Good to see you. You get a hangover after 3 drinks. Some of us are just built different. I would argue it depends on the drink. So even if it's, let's say you're getting 3 drinks of wine. Well, what type of wine? Different brands, different styles, different years are going to treat you differently. So I would never chalk it up to just genetics, because there are infinite variables that are involved in hangovers. And Have 2 then. You know, if 3 is the limit. So the Minotaur wakes up as his horns pierce in the dragon's chest. He appears at the end of the story to tell Kang he wants to go twice as far as twice as high. That's great. That's great. You were pleasantly surprised, Saturn. I was too. Thanks for joining live, by the way. Does the book take place during the Summer Chaos? Yes, it is absolutely during the hottest point of the Summer Chaos. And by the time the Draconians start heading and joining the army, all of Northern Ansalon is already controlled by the Dark Knights. So this is like when the gods were convening and they all told Takhisis, look, we're going to let you take over the world. We'll take all the good dragons out. Everyone will just bow down to you and you can take over. It was about that point that this took place. Love the Arax. You'd have to put your money on Kang and his men getting away, even if followed by a large group of knights. I would too. I'd like them to anyway, even if they didn't. I like the idea of it. The thing is you have to look at the truth of the knights. They were the best fighting force on the planet. And they had tarmacs. Not landing strips for planes, like the species, the tarmacs. And Kang himself said like, oh, those are going to tear me apart limb from limb. He was genuinely terrified about them, and with good right. I mean, they're terrifying creatures. Let's see. Alhana and Goldmoon. What are you guys talking about? Alhana's great. She's angry wife trope. Oh, you guys are talking about the wife thing. Yeah. Yeah, Alana Starbreeze wasn't naggy at all, I don't think. She was a warrior, which I totally respected. So yeah, to your point. Age of Twilight is defined by Fae and Druid magic. I don't know about that, what you guys are talking about. Dragons get their magic from the gods too, not from the moons. Yeah, I knew it wasn't from the moons. I just didn't know whether it was innate because they were created with the earth or because the gods granted them it, you know? Because the dormant magic in Krynn. The primal magic. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Let's see here. Didn't Erika's get his spells from Takhisis? Yeah, humans, like any mortal race, always were granted it by the gods, whether it was from Takhisis or one of the 3 gods of magic. That's just a thing. Like the gods can grant you things. But when it's the monsters, that's where it was a little bit different. You think Draconians is innate and it was hidden from the ritual and praying to the Dark Queen? Lady of the Brooks proved that Kang could use magic after the queen left. Well, the queen didn't leave. That's the thing. That's the thing we all have to remember. I don't know if anyone's read 5th Age or not, but Takhisis, at that moment that Chaos was defeated, stole Krynn. And she was always there the whole time. She was the shadow sorcerer. I'm like creating massive spoilers for people who haven't read it, but it's like 20 years old, so come on. Anyway, let's see. Only one can bring the doom, and that's Lord Soth. Yeah, John. Love me some Lord Soth. He's badass, and I hated the way they killed him. I hated it. All right, so there's a great short story about Kang and Slith meeting in Dragon Magazine 276 called Kang's Command. I will check that out. Thank you, Saris, for bringing that to my attention. S. Wild, thanks for joining live. Oh, is it copper, not silver dragon? The dragon... okay, hold on. I got to collect my thoughts here. The evil dragons, they all have their own like personality tropes and stuff, but they're all kind of badass. The good dragons' personality tropes, they're annoying. Like, isn't bronze like they love to just sort of hobnob with humans and pester them with questions and have long conversations? What the hell kind of personality trait is that? That's weird. I don't know. Copper and bronze dragons, I think they could do a little bit better with their personality traits. Let's see. You think the short story is either in Dragons of Krynn? Oh, I do have Dragons of Krynn. I probably already read it and I just forgot about it. See, there's other short stories in Dragons of Krynn, Dragons of War, and Heroes and Fools. I've read Dragons of Krynn. I haven't Dragons of War, and I haven't Heroes and Fools. So that's on my list, but the list is long. The thing is, like, the way I do these is I'll read a Dragonlance book and then I'll read another book that I want to read, you know, like just like a fun whatever. Like right now I'm in the middle of the latest Star Wars Thrawn book. But, you know, like I just finished a book called 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. I'm just looking at them on the shelf. It's from 1977 or something like that, but it's a great book about why you shouldn't watch television and what it does to or what it has done to our society at this point. But it also can extrapolate out to social media and this sort of danger of that and the changes that it creates in human beings. It's really interesting. I highly recommend it for anyone who wants to read a non-Dragonlance story. But it is dated. All right, so company politics, killing soft, not yeah. Let's see. True, we never really get to see the good dragons as advertised in things pretty much ever. So they only ever get fleshed out as allies and general non-combatants. Yeah, that's frustrating. Like in the War of Souls, we got the two dragons. I can't remember their names at this point, but it was a blue dragon and was it a silver dragon? Or it was two dragons that, like, one of them was blinded and like it was a silver dragon that guarded the Citadel of Light. Anyway, it got wounded and stuff, and they ended up just going together trying to figure out who this god was that Kellandros alluded to. You know, where Takesis was and stuff. It was very kind of cool seeing this good dragon and bad dragon and their interaction between each other, and then them masquerading as humans, you know, engaging with other human beings and stuff. It was all kind of cool. Mirror, thank you, Trees. It was Mirror and it was like Razor or something like that? Was the blue one? Anyway. Mirror was the blind one, but Razor came around and was like helping him. I think it was Razor. Anyway, doesn't matter. That's all for this. My review of the Doom Brigade by Margaret Weis and Don Perrin. What do you guys think about draconians changing from mindless monsters to endearing characters? What do you think about this novel? Do you think it was well written? Ripe with errors that bugged you, but you forgave it because you had a good time reading it? Feel free to email me at info@dlsaga.com or leave a comment below. For those of you joining me live, I really appreciate you guys. You guys are awesome. If you're watching this after the fact, tune in live sometime. You can chat with all these good folks, and we can just geek out about a favorite fantasy world of ours called Dragonlance. What's not to love, right? That's great. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the DragonLance Saga, and I hope you'll join me in the celebration. Thank you for watching. My name's Adam, and until next time, Slàinte That's Ken writing it.